Hey, folks.
Hello.
How you doing, Dennis?
Doing all right. Need more coffee, but that's normal.
I've maxed out. I'm on the really strong stuff now, the water.
Yeah, I need to. Actually, been looking at like espresso machines. I'm not sure if
It's a really, really good investment.
they're
And a
usually
very
a pretty hefty investment, but it seems like one that will pay for itself, I feel.
I've already reached payback point very quickly with mine.
It just gets intense with like the brands and then the very steep slope of pricing or whatever. It gets very expensive very quickly. Anyway,
It's an expensive hobby, that's for sure.
yeah.
I see the Zoom link works today. I'll give it a little, maybe a minute. How's everyone's weekend? Sleepy.
Uneventful.
Very. I need another cup of coffee.
Still trying to wake up.
How about yours?
I bleached my son's hair this weekend. So he looks like an anime character.
Is he ready to be in a band?
Yeah, he's ready to be in a band. He's got some color changing glasses. So they're like all black when he gets in the sun. So yeah, he's a band member. Okay, we're 1 minute over. Thank you all for joining. This is the Maintainership Working Group for May 23rd, 2022. And let's go over changes since last time if you want to get us started, Max.
Sure. So yeah, we made some good progress. I've sort of put a 50% complete mark on it, but we're open to that. So the data from Roulette is now available in Sisense and can be queried, which is really great. And I've put a link in the agenda there to the work I've done to start building out some sort of meaningful dashboards based mainly on Dava's suggestions for what that dashboard should look like in terms of how it can be valuable. Left for this exit criteria, so it doesn't go on forever, I guess, to define an endpoint for it. So I think we should try and build as many of those graphs as possible. And where it's not possible, to figure out either why or whether or not, to maybe follow up to build those at a later date. And based on that newly available analysis, whether or not we should be updating our KPIs for maintainership in general.
And I'll just note that at the bottom of your dashboard, Max, I've also added just front-end database and back-end MRs that we receive per month. And so this is sort of the demand aspect.
Excellent.
This is also using the scaling targets functionality. And so we can have like a prediction in the future of how many we expect.
Awesome. That's really cool. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Alex. Yeah, Alex is here.
Yeah, hello. So for the training maintainership updates, I've put a completion mark of about 5%. I don't think that I haven't made a whole lot of progress on this. I did file an issue last week that I'm just starting to circulate now about soliciting proposals for updating how we want to handle training maintainership going forward. So if folks have a minute to look through that in the future, that would be great. I'll circulate this in Slack as well. I also wanted to say thanks to Chund for filing an issue and being proactive about changing some of the voting around adding new maintainers. I think that's a good proposal. So yeah, if people have feedback on that, please feel free to add it to that merge request.
Okay, thank you. Natalia, you want to go?
I've run a survey for backend and frontend maintainers. Database are not included, but we can include them into the survey as well, asking what is the number of MRs they are comfortable reviewing for the day. It's very rough numbers because we don't count on huge MRs that can happen, or like the last week of the milestone. It was also stated in the survey. And it seems like almost half of the maintainers prefer to have around 3 or maybe less, I guess, MRs per day. And these numbers is what they are comfortable with. Christopher, would you like to voice your question?
Yeah, I was just curious, like, if we thought that was a reasonable expectation or not, and kind of the other kind of follow-up is, you know, if it is, should we like give like some guidance, but like, to be clear, make it worded in a way that's not a requirement. It's more of like, this is like, you know, an objective or a goal.
Yeah, looking through that dashboard, I can tell that for front end it's 1.4 MR per maintainer per day. And even considering the fact that 50% of maintainers are unavailable, it should be doable. Of course, right now the distribution is not even for maintainers, but there's a different problem and a different solution for this. And on to Darva.
So am I correct in assuming that this was a survey just for front-end maintainers?
No. It's also posted in the backend maintainers channel, not database maintainers though.
Did we differentiate between, is there a way to differentiate between the two?
No, it was the same survey for both groups, posted on both as well. So there is no differentiation, but I can tell, looking right now, the results that front-end and backend maintainers, both groups voted mostly for 3 MRs.
Okay, thanks.
So my thought here is there does seem to be a disconnect related to the uneven distribution, which I know that there's an MR from Max on, but if it's comfortable at 3 a day and we don't see front end hitting that and we don't see back end doing that, so excluding database, should this actually be required guidance? If we're getting this complaint that we're overwhelmed, maybe it should be required that 3 is the expectation. Less than that is fine, but if you can take more, like you're not over capacity until you hit the 3. What's the thought on that?
It's hard to tell because, in my opinion, again, it depends day by day on how big the MR is. So maybe not 3 daily, but we can have a number for a week or a milestone, not per day per se, because again, sometimes you have an MR and you're reviewing it for 48 hours straight. But after this, maybe you have 5 MRs a day and they're all one-liners and you're completely fine with it. So the requirement should be for the milestone, maybe not for day.
I just wanted to know, I did share this with the database maintainer channel. I'm not sure how many people may have voted, but I wanted to clarify, is the 3 per day, is that likely meaning 3 review requests? So these might be MRs already in progress that you're just getting re-pinged on, or is it 3 new MRs per day that we're kind of talking about?
I didn't specify that in the question, but I meant actually 3 new MRs. So basically when you open your MR counters for review and you have 3 new per day, but we can maybe fix the question and run the survey with it differently, especially if now we want to make it a requirement. We can ask people again, if you're comfortable with this requirement or not.
Yeah, that's actually, let's get clarification on that, because like having 3 outstanding versus 3 per day is a completely different, well, a different order of magnitude, I'm guessing, at the end of the milestone.
I also kind of wonder if we should be doing more differentiation between the types of maintainership too, because there aren't really one-liner database merge requests, right? Like that doesn't exist. There's a lot of testing that goes into all of those. So sometimes some things are bigger than other things, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's why earlier on, Michelle asked the question, should we make it required? I think we eventually get there, but I don't know if I'm there. Like, what I don't want to do is put out a requirement and then everybody feels like this is unattainable, right? So it's almost like we have to get in there and kind of get a better feel for what's realistic. Like we're getting survey information that says that that's realistic from a population, but like I still feel like there's enough of a percentage of folks that probably didn't respond or give feedback that I'd be cautious about just immediately putting it in, oh, it's required. And you know, immediately everybody's like, well, I can't even get to that pace, right?
Christopher, what are your thoughts on using the word required in the survey to get more feedback to say, how would you feel if X number was required? Maybe that would elicit a more accurate response.
I would do it as a separate question, but yeah, I think that might be a good survey question to kind of, you know, what are your thoughts on it being required to maintain maintainership or to still have to still be a maintainer?
Would treating this similar to like MR velocity at first be like review velocity, where you have a 30-day window and you have, you know, your average reviews and just kind of getting data that way? Would that be helpful?
I think it would. That's kind of, that was where my head was at, is just, you know, having that visibility. And then like, ultimately we're trying to do is we're trying to make it easier for people to review code, right? So that's kind of the thought process here.
David Kim as well. I don't think he's added it to the agenda. It's pretty new, but David Kim created an issue for capacity. What's our review capacity so that we can reduce our feature work, which would decrease throughput. And so maybe having this review velocity kind of number to, I don't want to use the word counteract, but sit alongside the throughput number. And so are there any actions that we can take on this one? Natalia, I think a new survey.
Yes, I think there should be actually different surveys, because it's a good point about different groups having different size of MR. So like separate ones for backend, frontend, and database at least. And maybe we can add the question about required, expected, so more strict question and how people feel about it.
Okay. Alan, do you have information today to do some sort of review velocity metric?
I could look into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Dennis.
Trying to find my mouse so I can hit the unmute button. I apologize. Cool. So with the, I haven't made much progress since the last update here in terms of the open training maintainer issues. That said, I have made the data public, and I will be chiming into the issues later today. Now that the dashboards and Sisense is set up, I can see that we can set up some queries there to be able to filter between training maintainer issues and how long they've been open. As far as immediate action items, though, I am looking at, so we originally discussed issues that have been around for a year should definitely be looked at, either being updated or closed. I've looked into that a little bit further. There are 39 issues that haven't been updated in the past 6 months, 17 that haven't been updated in the past year. I'm just thinking we just go with the 39 that haven't been updated in the past 6 months. I'll ping the assignees, the training maintainers, as well as the managers to see if they'd still like to move forward with that. Otherwise, we can close those issues out just to have a updated look at who's actively working to become training maintainer. At the same time, still looking, and I've linked to the bookmark further down the agenda in terms of how we can provide some more clarification around how we can keep these issues up to date, as well as referring to tools like GitLab, Tanuki, I think it's called, to be able to update training maintainer issues a little bit easier. But the data is all there if anyone would like to poke around, but I'll definitely be looking to see how we can build that into Sisense now that we've got a dashboard set up.
Dennis, this might be too early of a question to ask. Oops,
Sure.
to ask this, but do you know why they've been open for so long?
No, I would say, yeah, not yet. I'm gonna reach out to the training maintainers and CC the managers to see kind of like,
Okay.
you know, is there anything, part of that is like formulating that kind of message in terms of like, is there help we can provide, or, you know, to better understand why they've been open for so long,
Okay.
without, you know, framing it negatively or anything like that, just to try to understand.
As part of, I had one question, Dennis, as part of this effort, have we thought about how to maintain this, like have some type of automation when an issue's been open for so many days or so many months that the supervisor's ping or the team members ping, just because right now it's great, you know, you go through it once, but you don't want to have to do that manually every quarter.
100%. And so I think that's part of the criteria for, right? I think improving efficiency and how we can follow up on these. So I don't think, I mean, we have automation on and set up in this project already. So I imagine it's just another set of rules to say, hey, if you have a training maintainer issue older than X months, like ping the author and or assignee, and then we can have that going. So I'll add that to the, I think, Epic 4 to see how we can chase that down.
And I could be wrong, but it looks like, the easiest way is probably to open issue against engineering productivity team. Basically update one of our bots to basically do some analysis and then basically ping folks.
Okay.
Any other-
Oh,
sorry.
are there any
I was just
other
gonna pass-
questions for Dennis? All right. Moving on to the help needed section. Manoj isn't on the call, so I will verbalize for him. He is requesting help for this issue to add the approved by username filter into the API. This is functionality that already exists, but he needs that functionality to be added to the API in order to set a maximum number of reviews at a time for reviewers and maintainers. This is a little bit what we were talking about earlier in terms of, I think, Max, you correct me if I'm wrong, but this is work to say, don't assign me any more than 3 or how, yeah.
Yeah, any number really. But yeah, it sounds like 3 might be a good place to start for most people.
Okay. So if anybody can pick up that issue, I'm sure he would greatly appreciate it. Otherwise, this is part of the code review team, I think. Moving on to discussions and questions. I'm actually going to take my first point out because we already discussed it a second ago. And Steve, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I was just thinking about this morning about how maintainership is somewhat unique in that it's something that's kind of voluntary currently, and then the engineer is sort of democratically elected by their peers to be a maintainer. But once they're a maintainer, they just kind of are a maintainer for as long as they want to be. And there's not really any sort of reevaluation. And I'm not saying I've seen any examples where a maintainer has necessarily let their skills slide, but it's something that could happen and it might not be noticed until something goes really wrong. So I was wondering if we should consider some sort of a periodic check-in or something else to kind of ensure that maintainers are up to date.
Yes, my point is next. So we actually discussed this a few times in front-end maintainers meeting, maybe because of the front-end nature at GitLab, it's developing super fast and like losing some expertise is easy for all of us. We didn't come to any conclusions because it's very complicated to tell someone to step down from the position they're already taking. And I would be still in favor to having some kind of the audit over a year in terms of availability at least. So if someone is not reviewing MRs for months, like multiple milestones, red dot all the time, maybe it would be nice to recommend to step down from the maintainer or again, skills. But there is one issue. This should be disconnected completely from the career progression then. Because if we make this audit and say you're not a maintainer anymore, and if we have the requirement, I know we don't have a requirement right now, we have a recommendation for senior roles, but if we have a requirement, it would be an issue.
Actually, I looked at the job responsibilities for at least the senior backend role last week. And maintainership is listed on the backend engineer job family. And that was something that I was not completely aware of. And so I wondered if the working group was, but that is on the job responsibilities for a senior backend engineer. I didn't check the others.
Should be for front end as well. I think when we last discussed it, this is a similar topic in terms of like, do we make this a requirement for the position? And so the reason why it's mentioned there, but it's also saying like striving to become a maintainer. That language is specific because it's not required to get into senior, but as you move higher into excellence in as a senior engineer, it becomes more of an expectation. It's a weird one where it's like, yeah, so sorry. It starts to become an expectation that's like once, especially as you move towards staff, right? And so naturally you progress, further in the senior competencies. So that's why it's worded the way it is.
It was certainly presented to me as someone who joined as a senior as, not something that was critical immediately, but something that it was almost expected, as time went on. It wouldn't be considered underperformance for not doing it, but it was certainly, this is something that you should aspire to.
And so, yes, to clarify, reading it again, that is open to interpretation. But to Natalia's point, if we say you should not be a maintainer, and then in the job description, we say you should strive to be a maintainer, that's also a conflict. Steve, I think you're next, but we did sort of derail. Go ahead, Christopher.
Am I next? Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't walk over Steve. Just at a high level, of course, I'd definitely be supportive of this. The one thing I'm trying to figure out is that magic balance, because one thing that I don't want to do is like you can put out a policy that then becomes like almost like a quota or a binary policy where it's like you either are or you're not meeting it, and then people start producing gaming behavior, or what I'll call negative gaming behavior. We want positive gaming behavior where possible, but what we're trying to avoid is like somebody who reviews things and they know they're behind, so then they quickly rifle through a bunch of reviews and aren't actually giving it the thought process that's needed, associated with, as an example.
I was just curious about when this scenario would occur. I've seen situations where people move, they leave teams and they're no longer supporting that work, or the technology changes. But have you seen this? Like, is this a rare scenario, or does this happen often that people are not able to maintain a maintainership status?
What I've seen is in other organizations I've seen in cases where people become maintainers and then the pace that they were at immediately drops as soon as afterwards, and then it goes to some level that is below what expectations are. Though usually it's not necessarily like it's more of like it's a consistency thing, not a and because expectations aren't well understood, that's just what happens, right? Particularly with open source projects, you see that a lot where it's like somebody becomes a maintainer, they're keeping up some pace associated with that, and then that pace drops. And it's okay if it drops to an expectation level where people agree that that's the right expectations, but it's where it's say drop to zero, or basically not.
Would you think that in that scenario, their expertise in another field probably increases? So
yeah, I mean,
like swapping.
Yeah, so to that end, like there's general maintainership. So if we're just talking about general maintainership, but like the other thing is like I don't want this to be that you have to be a maintainer of a specific area always. Like it could be just you have to be a maintainer of some repo in the is part of product. Be kind of my initial set of criteria for like the job role description as an example. So if you move groups and you become a maintainer of a different area and it happens to be a different repo, and you drop from one maintainership and go to the other one, that's totally fine. That makes sense. In fact, if anything, we want to catch that early, because otherwise what's going to happen is it's going to look like we have maintainers in a certain area and we don't, right? So I think that would be is like the auditing, I think the auditing behavior, because we're not choosing a single repo solution or a single maintainership solution. I think we have to have some amount of auditing just for that purpose alone.
I think that's a good idea, because we ran into problems with the shell maintainership. That's exactly what happened. People moved on and we didn't decrease the amount and realized we didn't have enough. So I think it's a valid point.
Yeah, so like I think this inadvertently this fixes that problem. Though I think, like I said, you gotta do it. Like some people will still want to support that at least for some period of time. So like maybe it's 6 months. Other people will be like, no, I'm switching like instantaneously, right? And I'd like to support both of those models.
Okay, so just to recap here, on Steve's point, we've got auditing the maintainership to see if it's going well in terms of quality. We've got auditing the maintainership to see if it makes sense for them to be there, if they should maybe drop maintainership in one area and move to a different area. And we have a third thing, which is well, maybe we put it on the side for now because we just kind of sideswiped into it, but the maintainership currently being in the senior backend job description. And so there's really like 3 topics here. Steve, from your perspective, what action can you take based on this conversation?
I think I can open an issue to capture those first two aspects that you just mentioned, and then see if there's some more discussion that needs to be had and some ideas around how we can create such a process if we want to move that direction. And certainly, as mentioned, that would be kind of tied directly to the outcome of the job requirement discussion as well. So
okay,
I'll open an issue for that.
And Steve, I'll be a little bold. Come back with a proposal, something like, even if it's the first iteration, we want to do something small to kind of get this moving.
Okay, awesome. Very good. I think we have 5 minutes left unless we want to be on GitLab leave time. And so is there anything else we want to cover? All right. Thank you all very.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
it's a little late. I was curious, since we do have like a number of senior engineers on the call, like how does everyone feel about like maintainership being kind of like a not immediately expected, but expected later on in your role behavior? Like, is that fair? Like, I just want to, basically I'm asking that because I want to establish a general baseline before we start like deciding or debating whether it should be required or it should not at all. Though I do understand it to be like, I think in staff position plus, like that is an expectation because you are specializing in somewhere.
I think it's reasonable. I mean, GitLab is an open core product, and being able to function on an open source team as a senior requires the ability to be a maintainer of that project. You wouldn't be a senior member of any other open source projects without some sort of maintainership power. So I don't see how we should be any different.
I think that being a maintainer is a specific skill that one should feel inclined to develop over time, and it's a big responsibility. I think that not every engineer feels as inclined as others to perform maintainership reviews. So I think that should be taken into account when once one create a requirement for you to continue progressing in your career.
Yeah, I excuse me, my voice is a little off today, but I feel like I like it being required for staff plus, but I also think it's important to note that some folks may want to just be senior backend engineers and they're okay with that. And maybe for that role, I don't know, maybe it's okay not to be a maintainer, but if you do want to progress to staff plus, like the view you have to have of GitLab.com as a whole, or GitLab, the code base as a whole, it needs to encompass more. So for staff, like you need to be a maintainer. You have to have seen what maintainership will give you in terms of just not being focused on your area of the code base.
I think the maintainership as an expectation is something I'm okay with, because I also think it's a great learning vehicle. The training maintainer program means that your reviews are audited in a sense, and you get help and information from current maintainers. So it is a good learning vehicle and a way to teach people how to better review.
Awesome. Thanks for your thoughts on that. Anyone else? I'm just, yeah, I just wanted to get, yeah, please.
So I still think I'm a manager, but I was very recently a senior engineer. So I feel like I can still speak to this, which is like, I think this is the first job I've ever had where it wasn't automatically assumed that senior engineers would be merging code. And so I'm still like, whenever someone is like, well, senior engineers don't have to, I'm like a little surprised by that. And it's the first place where it's also hasn't been like automatic. Oh, you're a senior engineer. Okay. maybe there's some onboarding period, but after that, you're going to have merge privileges to the projects you work on.
That's fair. And I think, and so I'll try to wrap it up because I'm pretty sure we can have a meeting about this specifically alone, but I agree because I've been at organizations as that as well. I think that that's different here because it's open source and you are dealing with people contributing outside of just your team. But yeah, I think it's definitely a more unique case. But I also agree to previous points and like, yes, you like it's a whole thing about career progression because you can be a very good, reliable senior engineer and not, have that responsibility of merging code. And I think that's a perfectly good way to work as an engineer. But then, yeah, in terms of staff plus, it definitely becomes more of a requirement or is a requirement. So anyways, appreciate everyone's thoughts on that. Just wanted to kind of establish a baseline and then we can kind of work from there. I'll try to capture that in the, I think it's EPIC 4 or exit criteria 4. So thanks.
So Dennis, are you creating an issue on this under EPIC 4?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's the best medium for this to continue the
Just
discussion.
real quick, I thought Natalia was creating a survey on this. That's what she said earlier, so you might want to.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I may have
Well,
missed that.
in terms of guidance and how we really do need to wrap it up. So maybe there are two issues that get merged into one, but my understanding is Natalia has potentially required guidance on how many you should be reviewing. And Dennis has one on potentially requiring or not requiring the senior responsibilities. Okay, thank you all very much. We're at time. Have a good one.
Bye.